Hi everyone, this is Shivani from Impactionable. We're here joined by the ladies of by the ladies of Educase. But before we get started, I would love to share a little bit about what we do at Impactionable, and then we'll move forward right into the interview. So our mission at Impactionable is to create a community of people that do important social impact work. We don't just say that we're going to do it, but we actually do it. So today we're going to be talking to the founders of Educase, Neha, Ahmed, and Vedika, Murarka. And essentially they've created an organization that's created an innovative backpack that converts into a desk. And right now they're very much present, not only in Nepal, but they've expanded to Pakistan as well. So these founders were also the winners of our most competitive social innovation competition yet, with 369 applicants, and they were the winners of this competition too. So we're so excited to hear from you, and we're so excited to have you here. So yeah, let's just open it up. Let's start with the conversation. How have things been since the competition, and how was that experience for you?
Yeah, thanks, Shivani. Really nice introduction for both of us. Yeah, things have been they've been good. I think it's been busy in lots of different ways. Since the competition, we filed for a patent. So we're in the process of that because a couple of people had talked about how innovative our design was. And because it is kind of something so unique, we wanted to make sure that it had, the right kind of protection for it. We also entered a different competition with our university. It was actually a really special one for us because that's where we met, like at LSE, our master's degree. The same university held their kind of annual entrepreneurship competition, and we were one of the kind of winners for that competition. So that was really great. And I think Impactionable's experience really helped us kind of, that experience of competing and pitching really helped us to get like the confidence to apply to other competitions. So it was a really great time afterwards. And we've also been kind of still serving other schools and organizations. And one of our most kind of I think one that we were most kind of excited by was with Crystal Mountain School, which is a school that's kind of based in the mountains, and it's I don't know exactly how many thousands of meters high in the in the sky, but it's very high up, and it's in a very remote area. And the fact that we could bring Educase to such a remote area was really exciting for us. So that was kind of another key milestone, I think, for us. And I guess the last thing that was a change since then was also we've been experimenting with like a different size of Educase as well, because as we'll get into later, we did have it designed for primary school children. But we did get a lot of adults say like, oh, I really want one too, and like, teaching assistants and things like that. So we did make a larger size of Educase and are kind of now also pushing for that to different organizations. So yeah, it's been fast and slow because obviously the pandemic has also kind of hindered things a little bit, but we've tried to stay proactive and motivated and pick up on different areas. So yeah, it's been good.
That's awesome. That's really good to hear that you're not only moving forward with expansion, but you're also thinking of new products and ways that you're talking to your customers, and you're ultimately hearing that you might have another market open up as well. So that's very exciting news. Can you tell us a little bit about what that $1,000 did for you, and what that interaction with Even Because International, how that ended up helping you move forward too.
Yeah, so the money I think has been most helpful towards that patent, as we were saying, because they do add up. The cost of a patent does add up. You have someone write it up for you, draft it up, check it, things like that. It is kind of a process. So we knew that when we would get that prize money, the first thing we would try and do is that patent. So that's been really helpful in that. We've also, in terms of Because International, I think they have their next cohort in August or September, and that's hopefully where we're going to kind of apply and see it seems like a really great opportunity. I think the summertime was just busy. As I said, like I got married and it was just kind of a busy time. And then the pandemic and everything, we just felt like we can commit to it properly in like the next cohort. So yeah, we're really looking forward to the Because International opportunity because it has so many parallels with the kind of work that we have. So that we just kind of think it would be a really good opportunity. And we've had really good connections with the people from there as well. You know, it's led to some interesting conversations. So yeah, it's been really helpful, this whole experience.
That's amazing. And I mean, I would love to hear a little bit about, the community that reached out to you from, Impactionable. And I know that there were some community members that were highly interested in the work that you were doing. So, yeah, I mean, either of you feel free to answer this question, but how has the community interaction been?
It was actually really interesting because I think a few days ago we got an email from someone in Morocco. And again, we didn't expect that because usually a lot of our focus in marketing or communications is in South Asia. So someone hearing about it in Morocco was firstly very surprising for us. And someone seeing that it was applicable even there, which is like, thousands and thousands of miles away from us. So that was really interesting to hear. And I think just today morning actually, we got another email from, I think the country wasn't mentioned, but it was someone who runs a school and thought that Educase was really interesting, was an interesting application in their school as well. Again, we've asked for what the school is like and everything, but even just with a basic description, if people see that it's useful in their countries as well, it just gets us very excited to see where all we can go forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. The world feels a lot smaller now that, we're all connected to the web in some shape or form. And, you can talk to someone from Morocco on one time and then Jordan on another. And the world ended up just feeling really small because of that. So that's great. That's really great to hear. So tell us a little bit about, Educase, when did you launch? How did you come up? Oh my God. How did you come up with the idea? Just tell us a little bit about your origin story.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can pick this up, but Vedika, you jump in as well. Basically, as I kind of hinted at earlier, we met at university, me and Vedika, and we were a part of this. A part of our master's degree, there was a course called Enterprise Development in which we actually had to come up with a startup. And it was a really great course because it really taught you from kind of A to Z. It used the principles of design thinking to come up with a solution and a viable business option. And it was me, Vedika, a couple of others. We were a group of 5 originally, and we were really diverse. Like we had someone from Cyprus, I'm from Pakistan, Vedika's from Nepal. Like each one of us was from a different country. But what we all felt really passionate about was education. And I think a lot of the other companies that like the students had formed were very kind of they were for profit and like had a different idea, but we were all very interested coincidentally in social impact, the 5 of us, even though like we were randomly assigned, like it just kind of was coincidence. And yeah, we were kind of brainstorming what could we all kind of connect to, what's a real problem in the world, and we had so many different ideas. But I think it started to become clear that me and Vedika knew that in a lot of communities in Pakistan and Nepal, like students often don't have furniture to study in school, and it's quite a norm to be studying on the floor for like hours and hours and hours. And yeah, we just thought, okay, is there a way that we can create like a portable desk for these kind of students? And I think as we were going along, we're like, well, it could be a backpack also. And it kind of just evolved so that it was dual purpose because we didn't want it to be, we wanted it to make the students' life easier, not like they have to carry a desk with them and their backpack and their books. We were like, how can we just combine everything? So we're a little ambitious and decided to kind of go with that idea, develop it during our course. And then we entered a competition at the end of the course and managed to kind of win first place. And that made us feel really motivated. I think after that, we were like, wow, well, there's real scope here. The judges talked about how it's very scalable and things like that. So we got really motivated, and after graduation, some of the team went their own ways after graduation, but then Vedika and I still felt very passionate about, we really felt like there's something here and didn't want to really let go of it. So yeah, we kept it going. Here we are today after a lot of kind of prototype development, and we had desks that didn't even stand up in the beginning, and kind of like the idea was there, but like the prototype, getting that right took us quite a long time. But yeah, it started off in uni, and here we are now, like with a fully viable product and giving it to like over 300 students in Nepal. So yeah, it's been a good journey.
You said that you were interested in social impact from the very, like when you first started this project. How did that interest in social impact come about?
Yeah, I'll tell my side of it. Like you tell yours. Yeah, I think because I'm from Pakistan originally, and I've spent like half of my life in the UK, but then the other half kind of in the Middle East. I felt like I really wanted to give back to Pakistan, like in some way, shape, or form, because I felt very lucky that so many students, so many girls in particular, don't have opportunities like I did to study and to do not just an undergrad, a master's degree. So I really felt like I wanted to give back, and I think that it's kind of I think we've kind of come over the stigma a little bit of social innovation being something that's not sustainable. Like you can't actually have a career in it, or like, make money from it. And I think that has been also a really big motivator, that you can do good and it can generate business and profit, and you can live from that. So yeah, I think these are the kind of two main things for me.
Yeah. And I think for me, like, firstly, entrepreneurship was always like something I wanted to do. I couldn't think of any other career path. So that was one. But then whenever I thought about, what kind of business I want to run or what kind of field I want to get into, somehow I always wanted to make sure that it was doing the right thing. I didn't know in the beginning, I didn't know which path. I didn't know it had to be education or environment. Environment was always like one big thing in my head, but then I wasn't sure like which path I wanted to go to. But after you read a lot, then you explore more, and it's just again, like how Neha said, that social entrepreneurship wasn't like running an NGO. Then it was like you could still become an entrepreneur for profit but still make impact. So I think that also pushed me more towards how do you get into social entrepreneurship. And then when we were doing the project actually during our masters, the year before, 2 years before that, the earthquake in Nepal had just happened. So at that time, I was just like, how do I get into helping people in that? It could be in any shape or form. So I think coming up with the idea, I sort of did manifest my want to help in the earthquake thing come into Educase as well, because a lot of schools were broken down. So that was a big trigger point for me at that time of like wanting to do it ASAP. But yeah, it was always something in my mind since I was a kid, I guess.
You both touched on such important points. One thing, Neha, that you touched on was, people don't think that social impact and also, having a sustainable business financially go hand in hand. Can you talk to us a little bit more about what that looks like? I think there are some traditional aspects, the traditional space says that, if you want to make social impact, you have to be a nonprofit. Profit and impact don't go hand in hand. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And then Vedika, I would love to, touch on some of the points that you made as well.
Yeah, well, I think if you go back like some years, maybe 10 years or something, I think that the conversations around doing good were very kind of separate from business. It was like, it was hard to envision that you could do both. Or if you did, like you said, it was a charity or an NGO. And I feel like they have a certain reputation, of being very dependent and not sustainable and not kind of something you would want to do long term. And, you have to compromise. There's a compromise somehow. But now it feels like, there's so many businesses that we've learned from, and that, in university they teach you about. So many that are doing good. I think the earliest one that I think I ever heard of was Tom's, the shoes one. But there's so many Patagonia, like all of these different brands are showing that, you know, you can create a really great brand and it can be sustainable, but it could be for good. And I think before lots of companies like were experimenting with it, but now it feels like there are more kind of success stories that you can learn from, and it's a slightly more established. And obviously some countries, I think even sometimes when we're talking to people in Nepal, or you know, it might not be a fully developed idea yet of social impact, like a social entrepreneurship or social innovation, but it is growing. So I think that's a really motivating factor, because it doesn't feel like as much of a compromise now. It feels like I can be in a business that does good and feel good about what I'm doing and make a positive impact and not just make money. So I think that, yeah, it's kind of the evolution of how it's kind of become more established, and there's been so many good examples to learn from. I think that's been really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that's very, very important. And it's important to challenge that norm in that way as well. And I think that, you know, there is a difference between organizations that say that they're doing good, but, you know, when you really see the bottom line, it's maybe 0.00001% of their profit actually goes into that social cause. So really making social impact as a part of your business model can and will be sustainable. That's the way that the trend is showing right now. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know, Vedika, you said, you know, finding your specific niche within social impact. You were interested in environment, you were interested in education. Finding your niche was, you know, somewhat of a journey for you. So can you tell us a little bit about, you know, not only how you found your niche, but also, you know, how you might be able to, you know, advise others on how to find their niche and social impact, especially when you're looking at the system, because everything seems so interrelated. So yeah, I would love to get your perspective on this.
Mhm. So I think the most interesting fact, like how Neha mentioned, we were a group of 5 people when we were doing the project, and we were again from like very diverse countries. There was Nepal, Pakistan, Cyprus, Nigeria, and Singapore. So it's very hard to find a common point amongst these 5 countries. And for me, I think education was always something that could sort of solve all other problems as you like, in the long run. So if people are educated, they can understand environmental problems a little more. If they're educated, they can understand other problems a little more. So for me, education was always something that was important no matter what. Like if I was working on it or if someone else was working on it, so that way it I mean, talking to others and seeing that this problem existed everywhere else did help me. But also, like, I think just personally and how I've been brought up in my home, I think education was always put first. It was like nothing else. You have to study, you have to go to school. That's the first thing you have to do. So that's sort of ingrained in me, the importance of education. And even here, like, I've seen so many people who've come from extremely marginalized communities. I had friends at LSE who went to schools, who went to community schools that did not have anything. They would walk for hours to school, and now they were at LSE with me, which was like, an incredible journey to see. So you can see the impact of education immediately on someone's life. So that's where I got into educate, like understood the importance of education and wanted to help in some way. But I think for anyone else, one important thing I always thought was, if you have to be interested in the topic you want to get into, because voluntarily, involuntarily, you're thinking about it all the time. You want to think about it all the time. So, might as well like what you're thinking about, might as well like what you're reading about. So I think that was the first thing. So if you're interested in environment, then get into environment, because you'll want to read about it on your own. Like it won't be forceful, you'll want to do it. So I think that's the most important thing, something that you're actually interested in and not something that you think would just make money or make someone else happy.
So that's what they talk about with business, right? If you're not obsessed with the idea, if you're not obsessed with solving that challenge, then that journey is going to be 10 times harder. At the end of the day, it just goes down to the team, to like the person, the people that end up running this. And if that motivation is lacking, then it can obviously disrupt the business in many ways. So yeah, it makes complete sense. Absolutely. I wanted to play the video of Educase really quickly and, share that with the people that are watching this call. And I know that you shared the video as well. So I am going to share my screen really quickly and just remind everyone how truly innovative Educase really is. So please let me know if, you can't see my screen, and I will start playing. Wow. Absolutely. I mean, it's just so innovative. I know that this question is also in the chat, and that was my first question too. How did you come up with the design, the prototype? Just walk us through that process. It's just so innovative.
Um, I can start, and Neha, please jump in if I've missed any of our steps in the middle.
Yeah.
But I think the first time when we thought about the idea, it wasn't for government schools or community schools. The first idea came for like college students because that's what we could relate to. That's what we were at the time, and we thought, we how would studying in the park be easier, or studying outdoors, because I mean you can't sit in the classroom all day or in the library. It gets tiring after a point. So we thought, how do you make that easier? Or someone who's commuting to work, like, is working on the go, or is on a train or something, how is it easier? How do we give them a table? So that's where the idea for a table came, like, a portable table. But then we thought, what about your things? How do you carry your things as well? Because then you have a table as well, and your regular backpack, briefcase, whatever you carry to work. So that's where the idea came of, like, bringing the two together. And while making, I think we went through, I think, 10 or 11 prototypes, and they were like there was one disaster after another, I guess. We spoke to a lot of people who were into product design, our friends. We really tried to get a lot of free work done as well. We reached out to friends, or other college students who are into the design space, or even architecture. We were just like anything that relates to design, because both of us are, again, business students. So we weren't very educated in that sense when it came to designing. So I think we came up with a lot of designs, and then our first actual prototype was just a box file with some cardboard legs on it. And once we tested it in different locations, I mean, it was obvious that it was going to break within like 2 days, I guess. And so then we were like, how do we make this better? We went through different options like plastic with a mesh that could fold easily, but it literally broke in like 3 seconds, I guess. Like, we were so proud of that prototype. And then when we compare it to our current one, we were just like, that was so bad. Like, why were we thinking that that was good? Um, so I think we went through a lot of designs, but then also one thing that was important to us was keeping the two together, because eventually when we came down to the idea of doing it and making it for students, it was always about making things easier for them. I mean, a 5-year-old can't carry two things together. They will definitely lose one piece or another. Like, they'll either lose the bag, or they'll lose the desk, or it's, you have to make sure that it fits well with your customer. And our consumers were 5 to 10-year-olds. So how do you make it durable? Because they don't care what they're carrying. They'll throw it around no matter what when they're playing, or they'll stand on it, or it has to be lightweight. So there were a lot of variations and a lot of variables that we had to take into consideration as well. And then eventually we came up with a more backpack looking one, because then I think people would understand the idea a little more, instead of giving them something that looks alien, I guess. So I think that's where the backpack part came. And even our product designer who we worked with suggested that, because it made the bag lighter. It removed things that would come in the way of a child, like hinges or something that a table would usually have, that would make it heavier, or even cause I think, cuts or something if, a child didn't handle it well. So there were a lot of considerations, and then we had to make it waterproof or dust proof because, I mean, the climate here is needs that, I guess, because people, even the first question I think I got once was, how do I wash this? And I was like, we never thought of washing the bag. No one thinks of washing a table. I mean, you can wipe it off, but who washes it? So, there were a lot of considerations. And I think after 10 or 11 design changes, we came to this one.
How long did that 10 to 11 design changes take?
The first one was the box file was a DIY at LSE. We were painting it in a park, and people crossing were just looking at us like, "What is going on?" But I think 2019, all of 2019 was our designing process. We just focused on getting the right design because if we didn't have the right design, it just made no sense going forward. Giving it to students made no sense because if you don't have the right product, then how do you move forward? So all of 2019 was just testing and testing.
Yeah. And we, I think, like Vedika said, we really tried to do things as cheaply as possible in every way. It was really that kind of entrepreneurship, kind of trying to get everything done in your own network, or just really economically. So, for example, like we came across a graduate designer. Who was on this website called People Per Hour, where you can like just kind of book different needs that you have. Like I need photography, or I need a website developed, and things like that. You can put in requests, and our request was so unique that it was actually really hard to get people to like know what we wanted from them. But this one guy took the chance, read our description, and was like, okay, I guess this is interesting. And then basically he helped us kind of visualize it, because I think we knew what I wanted it to be, but of course we needed to have design files and explore materials. So this was in London at the time, and I was in London, and I was kind of going to all these material stores and like, phoning Vedika, like, this is the type of material. And because of our distance, like I would have to send videos of like the material and like knock it and like throw stuff on it, like to show her what the feel is like. So yeah, it was like a lot of exploration. We went to East London, where there are like these huge fabric stores where there's like just rolls and rolls and rolls of fabric, and we're just like exploring, okay, how does this feel, how does that feel, this is not waterproof, this is really thick, this is going to add weight. Like it was a lot of exploring, and slowly it kind of got a little bit clear what was really working. And I think three really key things, three key changes for us were really like, the first one I think was the fact that previously it was just a desk, and like Vedika said, we incorporated the two, and we did also explore, having legs separate and the back separate. We had that as one prototype, but then we were like, well, they're going to lose them, and then it's just going to be a useless product. So had to combine that. I think the second change that we had was also that it was previously the writing surface was outside the bag. So like it was the backpack that you wear, for example, the surface that you see when someone's wearing a backpack, that was the writing surface. But now if you saw the video, you unfold it and inside there's a writing surface, because what we realized was, obviously if we keep the writing surface exposed, it's more likely to get damaged because it's outside. So we made that internal. And there was also this kind of change in the type of legs that we had. Previously, we had kind of these legs, like Vedika said, they weren't stable at all. Like it looked fine, but then like you put something on it and you just were nervous that it's just going to fall apart like any second. But then what we did is we kind of really simply just tried to think like, how can we make it like a stencil so that it's just in one shape that you can just fold it all together, kind of like origami, where you just fold, and it's there, instead of having a very complex design. So yeah, that was the third change, and that was really a game changer, because it got to the stage where like Vedika and I have both sat on it. Like we've had customers sit on it and just try, and like it takes a lot of weight. It's very simple looking, but yeah, you can actually sit on it. We've had like a little kid stand on it. Like we've done all sorts of tests to just make sure that it's really strong. And yeah, it's passed all of them. So that was a really big change for us, and a big learning that actually doesn't need to be a really complex design. It's just a matter of how you fold things and like the physics. which you wouldn't think that there's a lot of physics involved in something like this, but there was, because you need like the center to be kind of stable. That's where kids write, it has to balance them accordingly. So yeah, I think it's a big learning process. It really did take us a long time, like about a year, just to get it right. So yeah.
Based off of the design of the desk, honestly, I would think that it would take you 2-3 years minimum to do something like
Really.
that. And the fact that you were able to do this from, scratch within a year is just absolutely amazing. And the fact that y'all yourself are not, architects or designers, and then you were able to bring the talented people in and then co-create with them, and then you're in the store looking for fabric, the various fabrics, the attention to detail is just absolutely incredible. So I'm interested to see how this evolves over time. Are y'all thinking about making any design changes or anything moving forward, or is this something that I know that you've already started taking this to schools and it's starting to scale, but yeah, would that be something that's a part of your journey at Educase?
So we're always, I think, thinking of making the design, like how do we improve the design? So of course, like currently it's the one which you just saw. So that was like our last prototype. But a lot of times we get suggestions. So one of the suggestions we got was, where would they keep their stationery? Because the kids carry their pencils separately, and sometimes they get lost in the bag. So we added a small pocket inside so they can put their pencils and pens separately so that it doesn't get lost within the legs, I guess. And then I think recently we learned that in some schools children actually carry their lunch as well, like a small box with their food for the day. And I mean, we haven't incorporated that, but again, there are like little things which we keep thinking about. For example, the larger size, because one of the organizations didn't want it for the students they were working with, but actually wanted it for the volunteers who go and teach the students, because again, the classroom they teach in doesn't have a table for the teachers as well, right? So they were like, why don't we try it for our volunteers? And that time we didn't have a larger size, and Neha and I, we just sat together on Zoom, and she had a big cardboard with her and I had the prototype with me, and we were measuring it on ourselves because we couldn't go to people and test it on them. So we were just like, how do we increase it x, by this proportion so the legs will become bigger, like that. So I think we constantly try to make it better in terms of, like, the requirement. And another improvement which we made recently was the Crystal Mountain School Neha mentioned. So that school is like 14,000 feet high. It's like literally in the middle of the mountains. They have to shut for like 5 months because the school is completely covered with snow. You can't even see the school. So that was like an interesting task for us, because the first question they asked us was, will this material work in like extremely cold conditions? Like, will it become so stiff that it breaks almost? And we thought, does fabric break? Like, we didn't understand that concept, but luckily we spoke to our manufacturers and the people who provide fabric, and they were like, no, this goes to, like, this is used in trekking rucksacks as well, so it does managed to stay strong. And then because the kids were so small, they wanted more padded straps, and we hadn't added that yet. Ours was just regular nylon straps. So then we spoke to our manufacturers and we made it more padded, and it's more comfortable for students now. And I think we've put that in the regular bags as well. It's not on a request basis, but it's just there now. So, little additions, as we keep hearing, we keep adding them and keep improving.
Yeah.
That is crazy, because it goes back to the fact that you continuously ask your customers, like specific design changes. You ask your customers, like, they ask questions about things that you may have not considered in the beginning, and then you go out and look for the answer and then provide it. It's like constant reiterating, and it shows really high customer engagement as well. So kudos, that's amazing. Do you typically have to ask teachers to demonstrate, or do they watch the video, or how do they know how it works? How do they know how to set it up from a backpack to a desk?
So we actually have an instruction sheet which is in English and Nepali because again it depends on the teacher's language proficiency. So we provide them with a sheet that shows a step-by-step thing, but also a video. And luckily, with the technology of smartphone, I guess, and everyone has one. So we send a small video of us folding the bag as well, and it's pretty easy to get. It was actually fun to see the first time I went to a school in Nepal for our first pilot. The kids, they have no patience firstly, so they immediately open the bags, and I mean it was shocking to see that one kid got it before I taught them how to do it as well. It was so fascinating, and they were competing against each other of after we taught them. They were competing against each other who can make it the fastest. So it was interesting to see that kids learn it faster than adults because they're more interested and they're more like curious to see how things go, and adults are a little more like let's do a step by step thing. So it's fun to see that. But when we give it to organizations, because a lot of times we don't directly interact with the schools, it's through organizations. So we teach someone in the organization how to fold it because they eventually do go to the field. So it's through videos and an instruction sheet, and it's actually really simple. It takes like 20 seconds to fold it.
Mm, that's really interesting. So then tell us a little bit about your business model. How much do they cost? Do you sell it to the organization? Just tell us a little bit about what that supply chain looks like.
Um, so we actually sell, so our customers, immediate customers, are organizations and not the students themselves. Because I mean, of course, these students come from marginalized communities. So again, income, I mean, funds aren't going towards backpacks and everything. It's just meeting basic needs. So we usually sell to organizations that have educational initiatives. So um, they work with children directly. So they buy from us and then give it to the children for free. So we've worked with different organizations, some that actually build schools, some that teach children in marginalized communities. For example, Teach for All. So there's like a Teach for Nepal here, and there's like a Teach for X in different countries. So, organizations like that. Uh, a lot of times we also work with organizations that have like scholarship programs for children. So one of the gifts that they'd give the kid is an Educase or like, the whole classroom, and even merchandise. I think that was a new one for us when they gave it to volunteers as a merch pack with like mugs and t-shirts. So they would all put it in Educase, create a kit, and give it to either the volunteers or the students they were supporting.
That's amazing. Wow. I know that I have a million more questions to ask, but now it's time for our community questions time. So I know that we have a few questions in the chat. So I will start with the first one from Boralachi. Where do you want to see Educase in the next year to 3 years? What does the future look like?
Yeah, so I think the kind of focus for us right now is establishing our presence in Nepal. So I know you said earlier that we started in Pakistan, but we haven't started yet. The idea is to go there one day, but I think for now, it's really important for us to get the hang of distributing in Nepal itself, learning from those experiences, and then trying to understand, okay, how can we operate in other countries? Because, do we export it? Do we make them in the country itself? There are quite big questions that we want to explore and understand before making such big moves. So I think in Nepal, I think currently it's quite hard because the as Vedika was saying, they're currently experiencing the second wave. Um, so things are a little bit on hold, but I think for us that's really key. As kind of our first year is really just understand, because like Vedika said, we encounter all sorts of challenges. We've had people say, like the snow one, where like, will the backpack break in like freezing temperatures, or if we have to distribute it in a totally rural village. Like there are so many things that we're always learning, that I think these are really key. It's a really good testing ground for us, Nepal, to then explore other countries in the future. I think that also the really important thing for us is expand our team. So at the moment, it's just Vedika and I, and although that's great, I mean, it's a lot of responsibility between two people, and it's easy to get distracted when it's just two of you and there's so many different tasks to do. So we are always thinking about, how do we expand our team, interns, when do we bring them on? And so that's something we're always thinking about, expanding our team.
It's
Patent,
something that we can help you with, by the way. So.
yeah, yeah, I know. That's great. That's amazing. Um, and yeah, I think patent as well, like I said, we're just trying to make sure that the product is all kind of set. And yeah, I think we want to also see Educase, as you kind of said earlier, evolved and to become a more valuable solution. And often we do think about partnerships as well. Like, there's a company that offers a solar powered light, which is like a portable one. And we've thought about collaborating with them to make Educase a more kind of holistic solution for people who don't have electricity at home or problems with electricity in school. So it's kind of, yeah, building our team, evolving the idea, establishing ourselves. I think that's what the next few years looks like in my view.
That's amazing. And it looks like the future is very bright and it'll continue to be bright. So that's amazing. I know that we answered the second question from the community. So I'm going to ask another question from Bora. So what does the current growth look like? I know you kind of answered this, but what's the biggest risk that you're facing right now as a business?
I think the biggest risk, I think, as most of the world is facing right now, is the COVID pandemic. So we actually expected a lot of growth in the past 2 months, so April and May, because that's when the school year begins in Nepal. But we had like a really bad wave in the last 2 months. So I think the whole country was just shut down. We've been in lockdown for the past 5.5, 6 weeks right now. So because of that, schools have closed, and all the organizations that we usually work with, because all the organizations we first like initially work with are NGOs and impact-based organizations, and all their budgets directly move towards healthcare instead of like their primary jobs, I guess, because that's the first priority right now. So I think that's been our biggest challenge when it comes to growth. But in the next few months, again, hopefully, when things get better and schools start again, then we expect more organizations to adopt Educase, because I think one of the key learnings from 2020 when we did our pilot study was that a lot of students, they were using their desks at home as well, and it gave them an excuse to study. So one of the teachers we spoke to actually said that they enjoy making the desk so much that they just make it, and it's an excuse to just turn pages of their books, I guess. So it pushes them to study, I guess. And also it was creating more of like so a lot of times students, like 4 or 5 kids, they would meet outside school, and a teacher would come to their community and teach them. So they would have like, small group classes outside school, and they would get their education. So it was like a small classroom, like a more structured classroom in just a garden or like an open field, I guess. So those are some things that we've heard from organizations and said that that's been helpful. So once things open again, and I mean, organizations can contact kids or distribute materials again that aren't health related, then I feel like we can grow a little faster than we'd assumed.
Yeah, one of the things that I saw on your website was you said one of the benefits for teachers is the ability to set up a classroom anywhere. And that was a huge value proposition, a huge benefit for, one side of the community in a way that I haven't seen before. So can you tell us, I know that, you're working with rural communities. So can you tell us why that particular part would be beneficial for teachers, for people who, may manage classrooms just overall? That was very fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, so I think it's something that we sometimes don't realize, right? Like we have always seen classrooms which have, your standard desk, tables, the board, etc. And it's really those things that make up a classroom feeling. I think psychologically, that you're in a classroom, there's a lot more discipline. But if it's a room with no furniture, there's like automatically no structure. and you kind of don't know what to do with yourself in a weird way, because you don't have like the infrastructure there to guide what you're supposed to be doing, the activities you're supposed to be doing. So in an interesting way, like when you add these little desks, like Vedika, when she used to visit the schools before Educase, like the kids would be lying on the ground, like they were kind of on their stomachs, kind of really just chilling, learning, but like in a super casual way. It was not really easy for the teacher to also have like that kind of structure and discipline and make sure that the kids weren't, like, for example, cheating off each other and things like that. But what happens with Educase is like it's a bit psychological as well as physical, where you just put something in a line and you kind of feel like you need to be there and you need to sit up and you need to kind of study in that way. So it does create that classroom feeling anywhere. That's what we mean by like it really is just, a couple of students with their Educase suddenly does start to feel like a bit more of a structured space for learning versus just like kind of sitting on the floor and not having that those resources. And what we heard during the lockdown last year was that students were meeting up in small groups to study. So I mean, it's really an ideal kind of product for that, to make like a mini classroom. And we did hear at some point that some kids were sometimes taking it to their tuition classes. So it was like being able to create psychologically a space for studying. It's like in our homes, for example, during the pandemic, I think all of us have had to make some kind of desk arrangement in our house. And there is a real psychological attachment to that, at least for me, where I'm like, I know that this is my desk where I will work. And I think it's kind of the same thing, where if you have something like Educase, you're like, yeah, this is my study space now. And it does kind of instill that discipline, especially for teachers who used to see their kids kind of roaming around, lying down, who are now able to put them in like straight lines or in pairs or in an arch, or, they can really be flexible about how they want their kids to sit. And that's really important, because so many different kinds of learning styles depend on students either being in pairs or even individually if it's a test or in a group setting. So there's this flexibility to be able to teach students anywhere, but then also according to a specific learning activity. So I think that's what we mean by like being able to make that classroom environment that feel come anywhere.
And another thing I wanted to add was something that Neha had like shared, like when you were coming up with the idea of Educase right in the beginning, and I hadn't heard of this problem. And something I think we want to address, like it's one of our missions to address, I guess, is the access for girls' education. So she was telling me how in Pakistan, a lot of times parents felt scared to send girls to school because they had to walk for hours, and in the middle, like the journey to school could be scary. There could be things happening that was unsafe for girls. So in like the solution to that was not sending girls to school. So that was something that we thought of, was bringing classrooms closer to communities instead of them going far away. And even in Nepal, a lot of times I mean, it's very common even till today that children walk for like hours to get to school. The other day I read in the news that there were these kids who would walk for 4 hours just to get to school, and like 8 hours in the day went in just walking, and they would actually have to cross the Nepal border to go to India to study in this small town because that was the closest school they had. So I think the whole idea of bringing schools closer to the community was also where the idea of Educate started. So this was more of like a portable classroom where one teacher had to come closer to the children instead of children from like multiple areas walking for hours coming to one study area, I guess.
You ladies are hitting so many important points. One of the reasons why I got into social impact in the first place is because my grandfather had built a school in Degam in India 50 years ago. It's a small town in Ahmedabad. And, he had to fight with the government, build a budget there, and then, he built the school from scratch with some of his friends. But, there's this sort of education vacuum in small town villages where everyone ends up moving to the city, and then that village is left to, tend for subsistence level of, farming, and they're thinking about their lifestyle and how to meet the day-to-day. So, that story instead was very inspirational to see that, out of something like that, there were 400 kids that were now getting an education. 8 teachers were staffed. whether or not, we don't know how effective, like the basic infrastructure was definitely lacking. They would look for donors from the government, from the community itself sometimes, but obviously, the way that the school was set up ultimately needed some improvement, but the fact that that opportunity was available there was really important. And like you, Neha, spoke about with some of the psychological effects that we don't typically think about when we do sit at a desk in a classroom. That, okay, outside is time to play, and then in here it's time to learn. And when you have that level of discipline at an early age, it can just prove to have so many improvements in your life and advancements in your life that can only help you in your future. When you see students, like I would see, it's the same thing. I would see students that would sit on the floor. It would be hard cement floor. There would be a teacher that had maybe 35 kids to one teacher, and she had to teach all of them. Some kids were in the corner not paying attention and the others would, but they were all sitting on the floor. They would be goofing off with their friends, and of course, there's only so much that the teacher can manage as well. And yeah, they would be laying on their stomachs, like they wouldn't have basic writing utensils either. So it's just, I think that whole psychological component of not only having access to those materials, but even having respect for those materials. And then that only promotes respect for education and the need for education moving forward. I think y'all are tackling not only the fact that students need a desk in order to learn. Y'all are tackling important social issues like access to girls' education, access to a classroom wherever you are, keeping that vacuum relatively small and keeping the education, the knowledge gained within the village. Y'all are tackling so many points with a seemingly simple idea. It's just amazing. It is absolutely fantastic, and I am very inspired. So, wow, so amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know that we have about 5 minutes left, and I know that we had a chance for community challenges and questions and all of that. Instead, I would love for us to, sort of ask those challenges in our Facebook group. And then what we can do is gather some of the responses that the community has shared and then present them to you afterwards. We can do it that way. And then if you wanted to host another video session specifically focusing on those challenges, we can do that as well. I just know that, we can have this conversation as an intro video into the amazing aspects of what y'all are doing, and then just bring in more community members that way. So, we can do both methods, and then, we would love to help you out in any shape or form. I know that our community would be ready to help you. So, if that sounds okay to you, we would love to move forward with that sort of mindset.
Yeah, for sure. That works.
Awesome. Well, I just have one more question for you. I know that there are going to be leaders watching and listening to this video session. So what would your advice for the next leader who wants to, our slogan is start small, but start somewhere. So what advice would you give to that next leader who wants to start somewhere in the social impact space?
Big question.
I know.
Yeah, I'll pitch in, and then Vedika, you add. I think, as Vedika was talking about earlier, you really need to have a passion for what you're working on, because I think, when you're working for someone, it's a lot easier to be told what to do and to kind of feel like, oh, there's a bit of a safety net that someone is guiding you. But when you're doing it on your own, or you're trying to make your own kind of business, or be an entrepreneur, you really have to do all of these things yourself. And that motivation is really key. I think we all have fluctuations as entrepreneurs where we're like extremely passionate and then one day we're like, nah, not today. So I think if you are not passionate about the cause, it's really hard. So I would say that's really important. And then I think it's also really tackling a problem. I feel like a lot of innovations are enhancements, right, to things that we already have, which is great. But then sometimes there are communities that have absolutely the bare minimum. Like it's almost hard for us to envision that these are still issues, but those things still exist. So I think it's also sometimes going back to the basics and seeing what are real problems, what are actual problems that don't have a solution versus things that are, enhancements and are nice to haves, because that's great too. But I think you get more impact out of things where there's a real problem and you're solving that. So I think that would be something I would say.
And just adding to Neha's points, I think completely agree with what she said. And adding to them would be empathizing with the people who'd be using your product or service is very important as well. Because even in the beginning for us, we were just like, okay, so I think this would work or that would work. But then when we actually had people using it, it was bad. So, just empathizing and putting yourself in their shoes, like to understand how exactly you're helping them, because sometimes what is currently being used is also like could be better than the idea you thought was better for them, because a lot of times like cultures matter. Something that that comes up in one country may not work in another country, so a lot of things do play into this factor of the people using or coming in contact with your idea. So empathizing with the people who are going to be your end consumers. And one thing I recently learned or realized was that a lot of times we're intimidated with coming up with something new or starting somewhere, thinking that our impact isn't big enough. But any impact is some impact. Like any impact in the right direction is good. So the smallest things you're doing will somehow, it'll just add up to creating a bigger impact and just add up to things that are already happening. So it like we shouldn't be afraid of starting small, because that's also important. Someone has to start small. So.
Hmm. Yeah. I think just that reminded me of another thing that like sometimes you just have to wing it. I think like a lot of the times we don't know. And I think people sometimes feel like entrepreneurs have it all sorted out and like know exactly what we're doing. It's really not like that. We're often like, okay, what do we do now? And getting advice from people and like I didn't think, yeah, like I think a lot of the times the opportunities that we stumbled upon were just from saying yes to something or attending a call that we, thought might be interesting, or it was a podcast that we listened to, or it was there was a person who had an inspiring story. Like I think as much as there are programs to kind of create a business and you have a business model canvas and you have all of these things which are great tools, but ultimately like it's not going to be exactly the way that it's written out in your kind of business plan. It's not going to be just like that. No one thought a pandemic would happen. That's also happened. We've had lots of bumps as well. Like, I mean, just one experience that we had was, some of our educators got stolen from the school. And we had to think, right, okay, what do we do now? Because we need to give them back. Obviously, they're in need of this, but it wasn't their fault. Like, there's so many things that as entrepreneurs, you have no idea. Like, I just want to reassure people who think that, you need to know what you're doing. Like, I think a lot of the time you just learn on the go and you just kind of wing it. So, yeah, I hope that reassures people.
It's about the mindset at the end of the day. It's not about all these cookie cutter terms and tools and tricks that you can use. It's like, oh, wow, one day things might be going really great. And then the next day it completely, goes backwards, not according to plan. And you just got to strap in. It's a roller coaster, right? So yeah, you never would have thought that maybe your educases would have been stolen, but you had to pivot the next day. You had to pivot next. That's what it's about. That's what makes it so exciting. So yeah, absolutely. Well, I know that we are at time and I do want to respect your time, ladies. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, catching up with you and learning about the amazing aspects of what y'all are doing. consider us very inspired, or at least consider me inspired. For everyone that's watching this call, please do, watch this video session, share this with others in your community. We'll be sure to put this up online within the week. And be sure to use any of the other resources that we have, our social impact job portal. We have competitions that are coming up as well. And if you like this video, please do subscribe to our channel. But Neha, Vedika, it was great having you on this call. And I thank you so much for everything that you do. We look forward to seeing you again very soon, and congratulations on everything.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you.